A very good morning to everybody. Welcome to another fresh episode of Hello Kolkata, Kolkata Calling's very own podcast series that we launched very recently, earlier this year. And we are in our ninth episode. Would you believe it? We are very excited for today's guest, and I'll be introducing him shortly. But before that, as you know, we like to give a quick overview of the week that has been. A good thing that we did and that we had promised our members and our followers on the page that we will be publishing a newsletter, which we had taken a few stabs at earlier, but we wanted to formalize it, give it some more structure. And apart from sharing the positive news that we do about Kolkata, we wanted to include a couple of sections, new sections called Job Spotlight and Talent Spotlight. And this came out of the need because a lot of job postings are shared with us, or we are tagged on those by our friendly community members who do their bit to help us and support us, and we thank them for that. So on one hand we get the jobs, on one hand we get a lot of profiles from our community members who are very eager to either move back to Calcutta or looking for opportunities in Calcutta. And we're still figuring out what's the best way to do the matching of talent and opportunities. But we thought, since we are short on bandwidth and resources, the newsletter is one way to go. We put out a job spotlight section where from the past week, all the opportunities that we have noticed, we put it there. And all the folks who've given their consent in sharing their profiles with the community, with the recruiters who follow the page and the HRs, for you to take notice of their profiles. And if you have opportunities for them, please feel free to connect with them. Fantastic talent, and they are looking for opportunities in Calcutta. So that's what we'll continue to do on an ongoing basis, and until we figure out a better way to do this matching. And I believe that's one of the, I would say, objectives of the page as well, apart from boosting the employment image of Calcutta in our own little way through our news and views. We would also like to play some instrumental role in delivering some tangible outcomes to the people who care and love the page so much. So we'll continue to do that. Very quick shout out to Moinak. Moinak has been a tremendous asset for us, and Moinak has been designing all the banners and the posters and the YouTube channel banner that has recently gone up. So thank you, Moinak, for being a tremendous support for Kolkata Calling. We owe you a lot. All right. A few housekeeping items. Please feel free to share your questions with us in the chat, in our messages, and we'd love to take them and address them. So with that out of the way, now let me very quickly introduce our guest for today. And I will do a short introduction because there's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to unpack in our guest's profile today, but we'd love to hear more from him about his journey. So today we have Aaquib Hussain. Aaquib is the founding partner at FreeFlow Venture Builders, and they're based in Kolkata. So that's a proud moment for us. FreeFlow essentially helps startups identify business ideas, find capital, and manage and govern their ventures by providing much needed essential services across various facets. And we'll talk about those as well. FreeFlow also acts as an investor, allocating fund to scale innovative startups. Aaquib, in his capacity, is also an advisory board member to multiple venture building activities across IIMs and Startup India initiatives. He also holds the role of head of strategy at Grad, which was formerly known as LectureNotes. He's also a TedX speaker and an angel investor. And we were just discussing with Aaquib about his public speaking days. So we'll get into that as well. He's also worked at IBM as a research lead and patent holding reference on cloud security and mobility. He's an alumnus of Meghnad Saha Institute of Technology with a specialization in cloud computing and security from IIT Kharagpur. And a little bit about FreeFlow before I bring Aaquib on. FreeFlow is a SaaS-backed venture studio based in India, obviously Kolkata, and with functional offices across the world, London, KL, Kenya, Dubai, US. And it helps startups at a global scale, and it's the only intuitive AI-backed venture builder in the country. It has co-created multiple ventures, helped over 280 plus startups, get off the ground, develop sales funnels for them, got into partnerships with governments, over 55 plus MOUs with corporate and PSU partners and government departments. 74 startups, or maybe the number is updated, I'll ask Aaquib about that, have been directly impacted by the investment of FreeFlow's direct investments. Also hosted 9 flagship events with investor community and established B2B networks. So a lot of good work that FreeFlow is doing, and it's also a national accredited partner of Invest India and is a government affiliated body. So we'll get into that because I think boosting the startup ecosystem in Kolkata, obviously, and over for India in general, has been something that all of us have been very excited about, and we'd love to get into the work that Aaquib and the team are doing today. So, with that, let's invite the man onto the stage. Aaquib, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Subir. Good morning. Thank you. Thank you for being so elaborate with the introductions.
Yeah, we we have an hour, so we'll get more into the details about you and Free Flow. But firstly, Aaquib, thank you so much for joining us. I think it was Rim Jim who was a first guest on Hello Kolkata podcast who kicked things off. She was all praise for you. And she said, you must have Aaquib on this podcast. I said, we'd love to have him. And so thank you for accepting the invite. And while I was, doing a little bit of my research about you, found your profile phenomenal. And not just in your personal capacity, but also obviously the work that you do in the ecosystem of entrepreneurs and startups. So we'll get into all of that. um, Before I go there, obviously would love to understand a little bit about the person that you are. And obviously we were chatting right before the podcast and you had some very interesting stories to share. uh, what I understand is you've grown up all over India across multiple schools, and you've been a brilliant student, I guess. And but I mean, going by your percentages and all the numbers that you shared were quite impressive, but we'll not share those with the
Sure.
community right now. But you've been into a lot of things. So you've been a great student. You've also been into debating, Olympiads, all the good boy stuff that a bright student does. How did that evolve? And obviously, would love to hear the Kolkata connection of how you landed in Kolkata.
Right. Landed in Bengal by default
Okay.
because Ami is from Bengal. So I come
Mm.
from a part of the state which is in North Bengal called Malda. I
Mm-hmm.
was apparently born in Malda itself. So yeah, the connection started as early as the first second on Earth. It was
Okay.
in Bengal.
Mm.
But yeah, as you said, started education and traveling very early in life because of my dad having this huge penchant to keep changing corporate opportunities. He was in marketing and sales, and he was in a series of these opportunities with. He was in a series of these opportunities with various. Am I audible? Subit?
Yeah, 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 I can.
Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't necessarily muster this together. Yeah, just give me a sec. Yes. Right. So he was in these various opportunities that he kept moving from one place to another. Took me to Madhya Pradesh at the
Mm-hmm.
very onset of life. So Indore was the first city that I ever remember as school, as a city. So multiple schools in Indore, from your
Mm.
early kindergartens to going through the paces in your early grades. Then Gwalior and Bhopal happened. A bit of Lucknow happened in between for 2 grades, which was between grade 4 or grade 5. Delhi happened for a bit, then back in Indore. So central India, the influence of Marathi, Gujarati, Rajasthani cultures coming together at the confluence called Indore exposed me to a lot
Mm.
of languages, a lot of cultures. In fact, the one language and one culture that I was maximum away was from the so-called religion that I belonged to, because
Mm.
I was born in heterogeneity and I was raised in heterogeneity.
Yeah.
So that kind of gave a lot of early perspective. Then the majority of the middle school slash the high school that we call in India happened in Patna, wherein Papa moved in for his own sets of personal obligations towards his parents when he
Mm-hmm.
was returning back. So that was kind of connecting back to the roots. So my paternal side is Bihar, the maternal side is Bengal. So I'm a hybrid in between,
Very nice.
as Bengal as it can be, and that kind of lent itself to multiple accidents in life. Some academic accidents, some inbound implications on myself for committing those mistakes that you do while you are
Yep.
that good student.
Yeah.
That ultimately meandered me towards Calcutta to do my engineering, and then the research internship that you talked about. I was with the MHRD ministry for a particular selected cohort of 13 students across the country out of 29,000 plus applications, who worked on specific solution areas since what I was 14 when I was selected on this. And that is where I kind of got into this world of engineering solutions and engineering products. So the introduction to the idea of engineering and the aptitude was pretty early
Hmm.
in the piece, as the good boy would like to
Yeah.
believe. While he did not used to speak, he still used to write a little bit. So that happened during that period of time. So a couple of research papers, couple of things that went through the motions. So some of them got published. The eventual research got acquired by a multinational giant in the space, but learned the business aspect of it via default. So post engineering and post the research internship, got an opportunity to work with Google for a bit.
Hmm.
Worked on a project that used to be called X1984. Eventually, it became Google Pay, apparently.
Hmm.
And then research and development and some amount of business development at IBM for a 2.5 year period. Some early promotion, some early confidence metrics that added too much of the entrepreneurial zeal in me, as doing some things which were different from a regular entrant level fresher.
Sure.
um, and that kind of gave me this, on in hindsight, the early overconfidence of being an entrepreneur. So
Hmm.
that brought me back to Calcutta, in fact. So early life was North India. The latter part of adolescence and early adulthood was in South India. Jobs took me to Bangalore, Hyderabad, a bit of Bombay. So yeah,
Hmm.
now the count goes at about what, 9 states and 23 cities.
Okay.
That's
And how many
that's
languages?
seven now.
Okay. Wow.
Seven Indian languages. At
Wonderful.
least four of them that I can at least understand and read. The rest of the three I can just understand and be conversant in.
Okay.
Um,
Pretty cool.
so yeah, that's how exposure kind of helps you. Heterogeneity kind of helps you. So I'm always thankful to my
Yeah.
father for that. So he kept making me move. And then educationally, there were opportunities that threw up with the Medical Council of India, with IITs, with a couple of institutes in Calcutta.
Yeah.
Two of them being my shared alma maters. One being Meghna Shah Institute of Technology, Techno India. The other being Jadavpur, which supported my research completion. So
Yeah.
yeah, those things happened as and when they had to happen. And yeah, I'm sitting in front of you talking about Kolkata Calling right now. So
That's wonderful. And I think obviously, you've been getting opportunities. Some you capitalized on, some you missed. Whether by fate or uh, because of decisions that you took. Um, you've always managed multiple things. Like what I was, when I was looking at your, academic career, and when you're talking about it, you've been doing multiple things. So you've been doing research, you've been doing papers, you've been filing patents, you've been organizing events, you've been working with, you know, I would say NGOs and societies. Um, People have this notion that engineering is ज़्यादा पढ़ाई नहीं होती है. So students have a lot of free time to do all of the other stuff. But do you think that all of this multitasking or multi-interest kind of a thing helped you later in your role that you have today at FreeFlow? And we'll get into FreeFlow, but do you think that was an early initiation into all of this?
for sure. And I've always been a very strong believer you're a reflection of what you do in your teens,
Yeah,
almost for the rest of half of your life, if the half of your life is that big.
yeah,
Because if you have necessarily been exposed to situations, is when you can actually respond with the right progressive kind of a reflex.
hmm,
If that reflex does not get trained at the right time, you'll never necessarily know what you're capable of. And a lot of
sure,
people who apparently follow the channel and follow these kinds of activities are within that particular silo of believing कि uh, एक चीज कर लो, उस पे focus कर लो. The
sure.
focus lends itself naturally. That never came as a default setting for me. In fact,
Hmm.
I've been blamed on that, in the sense that मैथ्स पढ़ना तो मैथ्स के साथ बायोलॉजी भी थी, तो
Hmm.
एक्सपोजर साथ में था ग्रेड 12 11 में, जहाँ पे आप क्लियर कट फोकस पकड़ लेते हैं इंडिया में कि या तो लड़का हुआ तो इंजीनियर, लड़की हुई तो डॉक्टर वाला बायस
Yeah.
ऑफ थ्री इडियट्स आपके ऊपर
Hmm.
रहेगा. सो वैसा कुछ था नहीं. इट वाज ऑलवेज अबाउट फॉर द लव ऑफ व्हाट यू वर डूइंग नेक्स्ट.
Yeah.
एंड luckily it wasn't ever a pressure point. It was more an enticing opportunity at the other end of the spectrum, that okay, if I'm reading something today, can I possibly use it tomorrow? Which is
Sure.
unfortunately not how we see education slash learning being done in our country.
Hmm.
It's almost always a correlation of what is it actually going to buy you as an incentive at the end of the learning, rather than the
Hmm.
process of learning itself. And that kind of exposed me to this idea of dabbling with multiple options, dabbling with a varied set of situations and problems that you could be in.
Yeah.
And yet kind of finding your own personality through it, more often than not with failures, and then that
Yeah.
those small instances of calling that milestone a success.
Hmm.
But that alteration kind of allows you to keep achieving chote chote objectives ki, if you're primarily looking at a subject, looking at a problem, looking at a job role, looking at an
Hmm.
entrepreneurial problem, it'll always have layers to it. It's never monochromatic.
Yeah.
Why are our takes to it so monosyllabic?
Hmm.
Is always been my questions, even to founders today. When I, as myself, a founder and self disrupting and self imploding of sorts, it
Hmm.
almost happened because of this over reliance on the penchant of trying to do too many things at the same time.
Hmm.
It has its own pros and cons. It gives you
Sure.
perspective. It gives you a lot of heterogeneity, but it also lends itself a question that, are you good enough to prioritize? Are you good enough to put in your scores and weightages to what your time and effort is going into?
Sure.
Not wanting to believe that I've been great at it yet. You never
Yeah.
know what would happen tomorrow. But yeah, that has been a trait.
Yeah.
That's how it's been. मतलब possibly since childhood कि रसगुल्ले भी अंदर गए हैं और ऑमलेट्स भी अंदर गए हैं साथ में, और mix it and understand what's happening, because the
Yeah.
digestive system is not going to differentiate.
I think,
So
yeah, it can definitely go back to early on as well, because obviously being exposed to different cultures,
right.
makes a person adaptable and obviously curious about, even life in a different way.
Yeah,
Very curious. Yeah, tell
sorry,
me, please.
just to take that thread. Uh,
Yeah,
Unfortunately or fortunately, what was knowledge or learning supposed to be? It was to make you more curious. It was to
sure.
make you ask more questions. It was not
Yeah.
about clearing assessments. It was not about clearing standards of now you are this because the
Hmm.
numbers say so.
Yeah.
So yeah, took it in that particular light, and that kind of allowed a few things to happen, and the others to kind of find their own feet over a period of time. So yeah.
Yeah. It's very interesting because I think it was also a very strange year, because 2009 you mentioned. I think that's when Three Idiots released also. So it's
Mhm.
not a good timing for students to be told that think outside the box. And when people saw that, for us it was much later down the line. We had already made our decisions on where we wanted to be, and then Three Idiots came. But I think in 2009, that's when Three Idiots came, and then obviously you're in the throes of the board examinations and the entrance examinations and all of that. But what when you were saying all of this just reminded me of a recent podcast that I saw with Varun Grover and with the
Mhm.
other three comedians, Prashasti, Biswa, and Abhishek Upamanyu. And Varun
Gravity
Grover is
versus
releasing,
comedy.
yeah, Gravity versus Comedy, exactly. And it was a promotional for his new upcoming movie, All India Rank. And I said I'll probably listen to it for a few minutes because I like these comedians. But then for an hour and 10 minutes, I just kept listening to them, and they essentially talked about this, that every student in India goes through, right? कि यही पकड़ना है, यही करना है, becomes such a high pressure situation for students. And when we were in it, we didn't realize it. We thought this is life. Now when we look back and said, like, what was the point of it all? And couldn't have been it done better on a different way. But obviously that's an ongoing conversation around our education system and what's more important for students. But without digressing too much on that, curious to know, Akib, on how you sort of moved away from, let's say, the IBM, Google kind of roles that you were doing to
Hmm.
getting into your own, entrepreneurial venture, which is INV, that I believe.
Yeah, yeah. So graciously, IBM allowed me to keep using my penchant of multitasking. It
Yeah,
took me to two roles. One as developing the regular run-of-the-mill tech platforms and tech interfaces for a couple of communication clients across the globe.
yeah,
And the other was one of these flagship programs that they had, which was called University Connect program, which was primarily building in or billing in all the resources that IBM used to train at various campuses globally to get their
yeah.
next stream of talent. And we designed a platform for it internally.
Hmm.
And when I say we, I kind of handpicked a couple of people from various cross verticals. Luckily, was given that particular access at a very early stage. I joined in as a 6A, had moved to a 7A pretty quick. These are various brands in IBM.
Sure.
So and it kind of allowed me thoda sa extra access than what my experience and age bracket and
Hmm.
so-called job profile allowed for. So we picked up about 7 people to work on this particular platform, which was primarily a phygital take on how we wanted to deliver skills and deliver it in a reverse engineered manner. So it
Hmm.
was like, what does IBM actually need, and what are these kids at right now at various campuses across the globe? And when I talk campuses, this was Singapore, Indonesia, India, a couple of other Southeast Asian entry points, which IBM was very actively picking candidates from at that point of time. And the idea was not to train the kid, the idea was to train the content. Because if the
Hmm.
content aligns to the kid, it will automatically find a fit. And wherever there is a fit, you will find the candidate. So it was looking at the universe from an angle which was thoda sa skewed more towards the demand rather than the supply.
Okay.
And then when we designed it, we designed it as a AI backed ecosystem. And I call it as an ecosystem which was backed by AI, because this word is unfortunately very loosely used in the ecosystem that we live today in.
Yeah, yeah,
Any Dick and Harry developing any product or platform proposition is calling itself an AI. I've
yeah.
still not developed one AI solution in life. They're all still learning. They're all
Hmm.
still on their recursive trails of understanding how they would kind of self-replicate a particular situation in a proposition, which is
Hmm.
necessary for something to be called AI. So
Yeah.
they're not intuitive enough. They're data backed. They're very smart data structures. So we built our first one in 2016, and sorry, 2015, within the discourse of IBM itself, and it kind of allowed me to build it for perspectives and requirements of IBM. Various
Okay.
roles, just reverse engineer that role, define a content generator which can disseminate the understanding of that role in various content silos. So if I need to
Okay.
train somebody on IoT, or if I need to train somebody on a JavaScript based notion, or if I needed to build somebody's programmatic skills, I would not do it like a module wise breakup the way other edtechs and edu models
Hmm.
would do globally. I would pick up the context of where it is bound to absorb, and then break it up into various content engines. Why various content engines? Because Subed and Aaquib absorb content in very different ways.
Sure.
We have very different stimuluses, we have very different responses, and we ask questions in a very different way when exposed to a particular situation and a scenario.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, through our schools, colleges, post graduations, whatever we might have been learning, we've never been exposed to heterogeneity on the delivery of content. It's always been
Yeah.
that one professor, one trainer, one teacher who has stood at the front end of the classroom and has been
Hmm.
responsible to cater it to a 1:60 audience. What
Yeah.
if I give them more data about who they are training? So our
Okay.
objective was, can we break it into multiple patterns in the classroom, which improves the ratio in the favor of the trainer from 1:60 to 1:3 or 1:5, which is
Hmm.
what it was reducing it to. And how? Because if Subid understands IoT via DIY and Aaquib understands IoT via jacketed content, and let's say Moinak understands it via
Hmm.
visuals, why is the content engine not smart enough to understand our absorption capacities and
Okay.
our,
Very
our,
interesting.
our reversion capacities? So That was the digital bit of it. Understand the kids revert points, understand his reflexes on learning, where is he asking the maximum number of questions, in fact incentivize inquisitivity, and get him
Hmm.
to a point that the physical sessions become very very relevant, because it will
Okay.
become a lot more data prone. It will become in a way the professors and the teachers and the trainers would have a lot to go by about the kids that they're going to train, even before the actual outputs are aligned.
Okay.
So it kind of increased the rate in which IBM started ingesting people, and it gave me a lot of hope. Initially, they had a 13 is to 200 ratio on picking up talent from campuses that they went to, and they
Hmm.
had a lot of engagement metrics. So trainers used to go to campus, they used to do these outbound projects and stuff like that. Um, we improved it to 192 out of 200 via the tech and via the
Okay.
approach, the hybrid approach, the digital approach. So
Hmm.
वो अर्ली कॉन्फिडेंस थोड़ा ज्यादा भारी पड़ गया हम पर. हमें कॉन्फिडेंस ये आ गया कि अब तो हम एंटरप्रेन्योर हो चुके हैं. इंट्रा तो हो ही गए थे,
Hmm.
इंट्राप्रेन्योर कर रहे थे विद इन द premise and the confines and the cushions
Sure.
of IPM. It was opening a lot of gates for me. March 2016, it was like, okay, I put in my papers and I start building it silo. मतलब ये अब education system में revolution लाएंगे, and
Hmm.
we'll break it open. We'll do it from KG to PG. We'll just
Mhm.
break it as a cycle wherein learning would be contextual. It would be digitally controlled. Data would be given to the trainers so that the physical transformation periods reduce, and you kind of keep understanding about the kid a lot more so that you can align them to the right outputs. It
Got
might
it.
be
Got
based
it.
outputs, it could be academic outputs. So that lent itself to the INV journey. Brainwashed about 7 other co-founders. Nowadays, tell people कि यार two is good, three is already a lot of rambling, four is this recipe for disaster. We were
Yeah.
10. सो
Hmm.
मैं और मेरी रावण की सेना अवेलेबल थी. ज्यादातर दोस्त थे, बहुत सारा पीछे का बैगेज लेके आए थे, which is never great for starting a unique new business. Often tell my co-founders nowadays and people who come with a lot of brand ideas and startups and models कि यार दोस्त तभी चुनो जब कॉम्प्लीमेंट्री हो अपने अचीवेबल में. दोस्त इसलिए मत चुनो क्योंकि वो दोस्त है,
Hmm.
because they're not great co-founders otherwise.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
one of them turned into my wife, future wife,
Chalo.
eventually.
Something good came out of it at least.
So yeah, some good came out of it. Some friendships kind of died the wrong way.
Yeah.
But we grew from 10 to 132 people. We went from
Wonderful.
3 markets to 132 markets. We sold to more than 13 lakh students. But
Wow.
we spread ourselves thin and wide. We did a lot of first generational entrepreneurial mistakes, starting
Okay.
from being too thin and wide on our cap table. So I never could necessarily talk to an investor because what would I offer him? I held very little
Mhm.
of the company.
Yeah.
We won the NASCOM product conclave twice with the product. So it was demarcated as one of the better technology products from the country
Mhm.
in the educational discourse. As an edtech, we were the top edtech in 3 years consecution, 2016, 17, 18. But while all of that was going right, and while we were clocking reasonable amount of top line, which is not necessarily the case with education companies in India, we're committing too many compliance mistakes, too many of
Mm.
these non-understood items on how does a customer respond in a certain situation. We were too married to the idea of the fact that we have developed something useful and it's going to revolutionize. तो
Mm.
कभी कभी अपने अंदर के रोमांटिसिज्म को मारना पड़ता है to get the pragmatism in,
Mm.
which we could not, or at least I could not, and I take full responsibility of what happened with the situation. The 130 odd people that we had on the roster at one point of time literally went with my word. So often it kind of gives me the feel up that I could have been a much better leader and a much better communicator to these guys. And a lot of people who had bestowed a lot of faith in
Yeah.
me have been bettered that way. But
No, as I say, I mean, hindsight is always 2020, but
yes,
but again, I mean, I think when you talk about your own mistakes and learnings as a first generational entrepreneur, starting from scratch, making those mistakes, when you and we'll get into the free flow journey here from
yeah,
here on. Um, do you see yourself bringing those learnings to the people that you work with today, the co-founders that you work with today, and obviously my direct question to that would be, how did you go from being an entrepreneur who's sort of learning, making mistakes, doing well, to getting into free flow, and how did that start and that journey began?
So was through a series of very low monthly average balances on
Hmm.
bank account, for sure.
Hmm. Sure.
Because when the going gets tough, and when your core team and the core rambling kind of starts going off, the wheels start
Yeah.
coming off. The debts mount up, because we had not taken any equity. We had built it as a top line company. So the idea was to execute our thin and wide experiments. We had taken some amount of debt that kind of piled up on the company, and at one point of time there was a reasonable amount of debt on the company. Crossroads, whether you allow it
Hmm.
to run or just sink and be insolvent to a certain degree, or take care of the debt and kind of come out of it. Chose the latter, because seriously believed that because of the edtech nature of what we had started at first up, I had
Yeah.
gone to too many campuses selling the romanticism around INV
Hmm.
and startups in general. And I did not want that unit kid who had seen me with a lot of hopes in his eyes, and see this guy talking to them with 600 students in a particular auditorium, or 2,000 students in a particular auditorium, and all having a standing ovation of all sorts. And then reading about him that, okay, he let his company go down the drain and etc., and went for that next big flagship blue chip opportunity that he was getting. So we took it
Sure.
on ourselves, to kind of build a couple of these APIs from our product portfolio itself. We kind of built it, sold it to some leading tech giants in the country, saved our day to a certain degree,
Hmm.
paid off the last morsel of debt on us,
Okay.
to the debtors. Did not keep it on ourselves. The company still remains afloat. I still file for its GST. The heart still lies there to do something in education. And that is where the government of India knocked in. We designed a program for them, which was called the Startup India Yatra.
Hmm.
We were the national academic partner for that, because obviously our tech roots were still calling out. And they wanted us to design it for 21 states, 3 union territories, about 9 months of execution between late 2018 to early 2019. We designed it across the country.
Okay.
Um,
And this
and
is Mindspace Ventures. Is that what you called it?
Come again?
Is this the Mindspace Ventures? That's what you
No,
called it.
so this was a transitionary period. I was still
Okay.
running INV, which was the Ciclo education pura space.
Okay.
I was still running INV. We had not shut shop there. We were using that as a reference point for it, and slowly and steadily getting a sense of how many Aaquibs were there across our country, great
Hmm.
country, committing how many of those first generational mistakes and so many variations of it.
Sure.
I'll get to that element of free flow in 2 minutes from now, but this journey bit was a little important.
Sure.
In March, what happened was we were closing out this program, and we had gone to tier 3 and tier 4 India. And when I say tier 3, tier 4, we really meant it. So we went to Kohima, and when we went to Aizawl, and we went to Kutch and Kargil,
Hmm.
Pondicherry, Port Blair, and you think of areas, and we went there, worked with founders there, broke open the innovation ecosystem, designed a program wherein a lot of jugadu innovators, and I don't like that word, but ठीक है, Indian diction में आ गया है वो. The jugadu
Hmm.
innovators and the school college based talent was all in almost inculcated together, trained for a three and a half week period, then brought to state capitals, which necessarily needed to be tier 2 capitals. It
Hmm.
could not be a Bangalore or a Hyderabad or a Delhi or a Bombay, or for that matter of fact, Calcutta. So we had to choose states that had tier 2 capitals. So
Hmm.
Lucknow was allowed, Patna was allowed, Bhubaneswar was allowed, Chandigarh was allowed, and tier 2 on not necessarily on any other metric, but on the ecosystems metric, startup
Got it.
ecosystem. And we brought them there, and then unfortunately, because of the design of the program, we had to position the finalists in front of incubators, accelerators, and investors, or the perceived investors. And I had been through that journey of incubators and accelerators. I'd gone through 7 incubators and 3 accelerators during the INV journey, and I kind of understood it was a very hands-off, very combinatorisk approach that
Hmm.
we were trying to execute in the country, but we're not necessarily getting into any vertical integration with a unit founder, or giving him horizontal understandings in a periodic manner, because that is why you go to an incubator, right? That is why you go
Yeah.
to an accelerator. There's a part of a business that I understand and I master, and then there's a big blue universe that I don't as a founder.
Hmm.
what do I do about that? Because that does not excite me. That was not the reason that I started. I started it for this one core ability, and one of my co-founders at FreeFlow very clearly, and Suraj Juneja is his name, is
Yeah.
he's super specific about this कि यार अगर कोई बुटीक शुरू कर रहा है तो वो for the love of fabric and for the love of fashion शुरू कर रहा है, वो accounting या स्किल मैनेजमेंट के लिए नहीं शुरू कर रहा है, वहां पे उसकी स्किल शायद शुरुआत में ना हो, and he's not
Hmm.
or she's not evolved enough to be there. So
Yeah.
that was an understanding that we already had by the end of this program. But unfortunately, the structure of the program was that we would give 3 awards, number one, number two, number three, across 4 categories: agripreneur, techpreneur, socialpreneur, and womenpreneur. Again, a term that I do not
Yeah.
necessarily understand. Entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs.
Sure.
But we gave them these 3 awards, 12 awards every state. Half of it would be picked up by the central government, half of the award money would be picked up by the state government, and it will be given to them. But that's it. That was all the effort lending itself to almost nothingness. I had the gumption and by then the extrovertness to speak this out in front of the table that sat, which had the ministry people, the Startup India, the Invest India people, and everybody engaging on it. And I had the voice enough to tell them that the program could have had better outputs. We left it at a point wherein it did not make a lot of sense for all the effort that we put in it. So they
Hmm.
were like, it's easy to find out flaws. Do you have a solution? I was like, do you have 45 minutes of black marker and a whiteboard? They were like, we are the government of India. We are supposed to have that much. And those
Hmm.
45 minutes turned into 2 hour 32 minutes. Those 2 hour 32 minutes today is called free flow. So
Wonderful. Wow.
we designed it as a transition from incubation acceleration ecosystems, which was very Western Europe-ish, states, Bay Area-ish as an idea, to the
Hmm.
reality of how India and Bharat correspond to innovation and hustle and new models and new ideas. We
Hmm.
designed it on a point that you don't need to handhold the founder and make him answerable on a monthly MIS of sorts. You need to kind of find technology driven areas wherein you can focus your energies with that particular person, and that is where the venture building idea and the venture studio idea kind of was sprout out.
Yeah.
And yeah, that kind of possibly brings you to
Yeah.
your next question.
So I mean, essentially, you started Free Flow on a dare, but I mean, I know you talked about how you disagree with how the Silicon Valley incubators and venture builders approach the Indian startup ecosystem,
Yeah, I
and
don't disagree with their model. It's
but it
just that
applies there. Yeah,
it's not a fit. It's not a lock
it's
and
not a
key
fit.
situation in our kind of cultural fabric.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, and obviously you built that, your own version of how you believe that India slash Bharat ecosystem should grow. And Free Flow has seen, some tremendous successes. We were talking about these earlier. uh, Zeron is one that came out from Free Flow, if I'm not wrong. Zeron, we were proud to host all the 4 co-founders on this platform. I read about Gurukul, I read about Play CKC. So tell us about some of these, startups which FreeFlow helped, take off, and what were some of the key inputs that FreeFlow put into their journey that made them scale.
so Subedh, I'll just quickly give you a sense of how the model kind of evolved
Okay,
also. We
sure.
understood the two verticals, that there would be something called a venture studio and there will be something called a venture builder. Very
Yeah.
early in the piece, it took about 6-7 months to kind of define it, me, Suraj, and a core set of people who kind of kept joining slowly and steadily. This time around, I was not as expansive as my first startup, so I did not
Hmm.
want to have a huge team much early in the piece.
Yeah.
But we were very sure that there would be two approaches to it. One would be a startup first approach, and the other would be an entrepreneur first approach,
Hmm.
wherein the entrepreneur kind of brings in the proof of concept, the minimum viable product in certain cases, or minimum viable prototype at least in certain cases, and then everything else would be provided by us. We'll kind of become
Okay.
the studio to them. The first
Hmm.
cash, the first marketing, the first distribution, the first channel partner, the first external infusion, etc., etc. So we'll sit on their cap tables. We'll pick up a piece of their pie and kind of become co-sellers, co-builders, and eventually build to sell as a model, which is the typical venture studio model that exists globally in a lot of
Yeah.
instances, and nowadays is caught up in the country also.
Yeah.
So there are about 19 plus active venture studios in the country right now. We are one amongst them. as a model.
Mhm.
Suraj leads it very efficiently, but we're super choosy there. We've just picked up 16 companies in the last 3.5 years of our existence, and we've chosen areas which truly excite us because we have to be 24/7 with these guys till the time
Yeah.
we start doing the partial sale outs of the companies. So from doing a master mentors to doing a signage craft to doing a meta drive to doing various such companies, we've taken them from a very, very pre-seed stage to almost a pre-series B, series A kind of a structure in 3.5 years. Investment wise,
Mhm.
that's not the greatest parameter to talk about. So the user base has also grown from an average of about 150, 200 active users to somewhere around 1.8 to 3 million live users on those platforms. So those
Okay.
have been the kind of implications there, but this is more so like an overall studio. So you
Yeah.
are coming in with that core genesis, core DNA of the model or the
Yeah.
DNA of the idea, and then everything else is kind of designed and completed and portioned out by us as a team. So we give them the CEO office or CFO office or the CTO office as and when the case need be, and obviously the first check. The checks are anywhere in between 7.5 lakh rupees to almost a crore and a half, varying at degrees of what the platform needs. If it's a hardware centric, prototype centric model, obviously the initial investments would be much higher.
Yeah.
So Suraj leads it with a lot of efficiency and a lot of gusto, and now he's become a social media voice also. So a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneur first models keep coming to that part of
Mhm.
our company. The startup first models are where the companies are already out there. They've
Mhm.
started revenues, they've started engaging with the model, they've done their product market fit to a certain degree, but they know for sure that they're bleeding at a lot of places when compared to their national contemporaries or their global contemporaries. And,
Okay.
and when I say global contemporaries and national contemporaries, they miss it out on aspects that are not necessarily clear to the core team. The way it was not clear to Aaquib that what was it that was bleeding him at INV.
Mhm.
Everything else seemed to be going gung ho. Even then, why were we losing money quarter on quarter
Yeah.
on our ops, not even on somebody else's investment? So those are things that a lot of these founders and startups did not understand. And we started with very early stage founders who were almost pre-revenue also. And in that due course, we built a data model, which we've now kept completely for beta usage. We will, inshallah, somewhere down the line in this year, launch it for other investment groups and incubators and accelerators also as a white labeled or as a,
Open
subscription model,
source. Oh,
as
not
an
not open
API.
source.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the idea was primarily ki I can't be the hunch or the decision, or my team can't be the hunch or the decision to tell the founder or tell the team that yeah, your bleeding operation verticals are A, B, and C. Let data
Mhm.
do. Let
Sure.
let a model do that. Let it be as biasless from human interventions as possible. And that's the SaaS aspect of our business, which is
Got
where
it.
we are super unique. And I like to believe we are the only ones on the globe right now
Mhm.
who kind of ingest it from various sources, from Startup India, Invest India, various startup nodal policies, which are partners. Today, there are about 7 state governments which we actively work with across the country, and some more independent nodal policy owners, especially in India and Singapore,
Mhm.
who kind of contribute these startups. They push it towards the funnel. We take
Yeah.
in their information, whether it be their deck, whether it be their MISs, the founder credentials and histories, what have been the previous exits or margins or whatever they've been able to build, and kind of subject it to a data centric ecosystem which takes
Mhm.
decisions on these guys. What kind of decisions? It
Yeah.
baselines them across their contemporary peers globally. So
So this is
who?
where I have a question, Aki.
Yeah, yeah,
So I mean, one, we know that when founders start up, they're not
Mhm.
very particular about maintaining systems and processes
Sure,
and data, right?
sure.
So when you say that you are using certain baselines, where are you getting these metrics from? How credible are these benchmarks and metrics against which you're going to be recommending to the startup founders that, hey, your function A, B, and C are not up to the benchmark that we've seen in the national standards or global standards?
Right. Uh, and a great question at that. So the baselines are not necessarily just from early stage ecosystems or
Mhm.
early stage startups or only of a geographical bias startups. These are global. So we are
Okay.
talking about 32 hotspots across the globe that we are reading on right now. It
Okay.
includes Estonia, it includes Western Europe, it includes North America, it includes a bit of Eastern South America and all of that stuff. It
Okay.
is reading from news, it is reading from reportage, it is reading from, so it's almost parsing a lot of these Ministry of Corporate Affairs analogies globally,
Okay.
and it's kind of bringing in macro and micro trends into it, announcements into it,
Mm-hmm.
merger and fund round announcements, dissolutions, insolvencies, PR, and a lot of stuff across
Mm-hmm.
various industries. So if I put a yardstick to it, we have data points across 21 different industries now.
Okay.
And that in itself kind of spells out another 56 plus subsectors. So when I say
Okay.
industries, I mean robotic automation. Then robotic automation further breaks into so many other subsectors. When I mean industries, I mean ESG. Now, ESG by
Mm-hmm.
itself is a universe. So it
Yeah.
breaks up into environmental sustainability, governance, tech, and so on and so forth. So we are
Got it.
picking up announcement, policy, partnership, parsing, and API data from a slew of resources. Traction
Got
is
it.
one of them. Y Combinator announcements are another. Crunchbase and TechCrunch
Of
are
course.
others. So a lot of these are partnerships. The others are API passes, and the rest of them are web and information portal passing. What it
Mm-hmm.
creates for me is where is the industry responding and complying maximum to, and what is it that's flying fastest right now, what features, what trends,
Got it.
what profitabilities, what benefits. So a lot of people want to build in India fab businesses, feature advantages benefit businesses. We look at the
Mm-hmm.
universe in a BAF universe, benefits advantages features scenario.
Mm.
So we kind of
Sure.
structure it that way. And when the models are kind of spelled through it, it gives them a score. It gives them a baseline industry score. The industries that the model does not understand right now have very low baselines. So in
Mm.
space tech or propulsion tech, we are at about 17 right now. Whereas in ESG, wherein we have done active investments, where we have some partial exits, we've done active technology interventions or marketing interventions, we are at an 82 score. Health, we are at a
Mm.
53. So if a startup is coming in, we just need to know whether they are above their industry baseline. If they're not, we send them a report on what they need to work on right now before we can ingest them into the venture building program. If they're
Okay.
above, if they're above that particular score, is when we send them an X-ray on their venture functions.
Okay.
Technology wise, you are at this score. Marketing wise, you are at this. Sales, pre-sales, staffing, manpower that you have, compliance, nodes that you are maintaining, and the kind of investability that you should be chasing or the investments that you should be chasing. Across all of these 7 areas, we send them an X-ray with obviously a maximum bleed area. You'll not bleed together or homogeneously in two areas in the same way. If we truly like the model, which is suggested by the SaaS, we send them a venture building agreement wherein we say, okay, your tech is bleeding the most. We become your virtual tech office between the next 3 months to 6 months. And we are going to
Mm-hmm.
vertically integrate that function to become a global competitor to your peers.
Mm.
Minimum of 3 months, maximum of 6 months. A lot of people ask me, can you actually overhaul it? No, I can give it a trajectory that's acceptable to the external stakeholdership, whether it be customers, whether it be investors, whether it be anybody else.
Okay.
So it gets onto a flywheel of sorts wherein it starts understanding its own personality. That particular
Yeah.
function becomes the driver engine for everything else. And we put in
Interesting.
resources, people, technology, SaaS behind it. So that is where
Okay.
we become very specific in our focus. So when I talk about a Gurukul, or when I talk about a Being Chef or a Play CKC or a Zeron or other companies, for example, LectureNotes or Blue Medics and others that we have had, or been part of the venture building journey, we've picked one risk area. That
Mm-hmm.
risk area or that one bleed area is where we've taken 85% risk. So
Understood.
out of the $100 that are going to be spent in the next 3 to 6 months on that particular transition, FreeFlow will pick up $85 out of it. Not against
Mm-hmm.
equity, not against a convertible debt, not against royalty,
Sure.
but against the service premium exit. And a lot of people understand this. You
Yeah.
have to save your cap table at an early stage. You
Mm-hmm.
have to be vigilant about the ownership that you carry at that particular stage. So we pick up that 85% piece, and we ask the company, the core team, to hustle for the next 15 without diluting themselves. Do an
Mm.
FNF, do a kind of a saving driven hustle for the next 3 months. Let's get to a point that we become almost a side effectual option to not just our customers who give our bottom lines and top lines, but
Yeah.
to our impending investors or imminent investors. So that way, what we are doing is They are not having any dilution. They are figuring out their maximum bleed area in the smartest possible way
Mm-hmm.
without issuing any part of their capital. And they're giving me an exit as soon as they feel our KPIs that we have mutually decided upon are hit. So as soon as we hit that, I exit at 130%. Now,
Okay.
some of these companies have been able to give me 130% exit at the onset itself. कि आपने $100 के against $85 आए थे आप, $130 लेके निकल जाओ आप. Yeah, they are like, Aaquib, let's break it into a royalty of $10 each for the next
Mm.
vesting period. Stay with us for this particular function because the
Sure.
incoming investors have found it easy while you have been around. So
Sure.
is as a the cohort kind of gets diversified in the areas that we are picking up, and as I said, we are picking up about 4 active areas right now, 4 active functions: tech, GTM, staffing, and pre-sales.
Mm-hmm.
We intend to pick up compliances in a much bigger way, and that too
Yeah.
automated compliances. Investments, we've already established an IB that will only be picking investments, venture building roles, and investability, which is consistent perennial improvement of accountability to the investor. Because that's somewhere that as Indian entrepreneurs, we've not necessarily been very responsible, not been
Got it.
responsible to our private equity investors. So let's
Hmm.
change the trend for that bit. So that's been the approach: SaaS-based selections, baselining, and scout, and then picking up that particular X-rayed function, supporting that function in a risk manner. Everything else that was depicted by the SaaS is a service from my end, or I can bring in a service provider from the ecosystem.
Got it.
I can bring in a Subid who might be doing podcasts as a marketing trail for a lot of these brands,
Mm-hmm.
as a strategic input or a strategic intervention
Sure.
for them. I might
And
not be doing podcasts myself. So,
yeah,
so that's the idea. That's the structure.
no, fantastic for breaking it down. And I understand that, you've already, been helping your startups with the tech side, the GTM side. You mentioned compliance as something that you're working on. Um,
Yes.
so far, I mean, and from what I understood from your website in terms of the solutions you offer, you have, support on finance as well, legal as well, admin stuff as well, and people stuff as well. Do you think
Right.
compliance has become a little more important and critical right now, given how the a lot of other well-known uh, unicorns, decacorns have stumbled on compliances primarily? Do you think that as a, I would say, safeguard that startups should put in early in order to prevent themselves from later pain?
It has taken precedence for sure,
Hmm.
and an early stage precedence now. When we say corporate governance or
Yeah.
some amount of responsible utility, responsible reporting, board structuring in the right manner, the ESOP structuring much earlier in the piece, and so on and so forth. Licensing and certification standards that need to keep upgrading uh, as per business models and as per business specifics and metrics. It has become much more of a vigilant item for the founder,
Hmm.
for the sheer sake that by the time it becomes manifestable, until
Hmm.
then it has caused too much harm to the business, and
Hmm.
not just to the business, it has caused harm to a lot of other stakeholders
Sure.
who believed in the core conviction of the business, or who believed in the
Yeah.
core model of the founders, and then backed the so-called appeal that the multiplicity in this model had,
Yeah.
but kind of missed the cracks in between. So the cracks are much more preconceived and are sorted out much earlier in the piece for sure.
Hmm.
And there have been so many examples from a
Yeah.
early Series B kind of a rumbling of affairs to the winter of funding causing
Yeah.
the chase and the lens to change in the eyes of the private equity investor, to eventually looking at the late stage exits that are never happening almost. There's no horizon for, let's say, a typical investor to see, where do I actually exit? Where's the
Hmm.
liquidity? Where's the money coming into the system? Or is it all about putting it out there? I understand growth, and I understand the advertising need of reaching out to a minimum viable audience by the
Hmm.
time that you hit break even. But there has to be a path to profitability which is compliant. So that's an
Yeah.
understanding that founders have got, and it's not as complex as people paint it out to be. It's in fact, it has patterns across industries. So you talk of a
Hmm.
very high on certification and licenses industry to something which requires compliances more of the advisorial kind. they'll all have similar documentations, they'll all have similar hygiene practices, they'll all have similar sanitization of core cracks that they've allowed to creep in. And if we can kind of automate some part of that process,
And
which is what
templatize it. Yeah. Why not?
templatize it to a certain degree, which is what the
Sure.
team is working on right now in Hyderabad and Delhi. That
One.
if we work with clusters, the clusters will have similar bias points of compliance gaps, and we
Yeah.
see it as a recurring theme in the country. Where's your MOM? MOM to hum nahi karte hain because the board is too small. So
Sure.
those things are kind of missing in the overall
Yeah.
constitutional DNA itself.
Yeah.
So infusing that as an office is one of our chases for this year. We will have a venture function on that very very soon, and and then again, not all of it would be done by the free flow team as such. There's an
Hmm.
ecosystem that backs it. So I can only in a particular function pick up 5 to 7 models in a quarter, not more than that. So if
Yeah.
even if I multiply it with 7 functions, I can minimum do 35 and a maximum of about 49 models a quarter, never more than that. What
Hmm.
happens to the 150 plus application pools that we shortlist via the SaaS and the
Yeah.
1000 plus that we get on the platform every month or so? That is where we are expanding the universe of these service providers and making them
Okay.
understand the benefits of taking risks on a service front upfront, and then raking in the benefits of long term exits, which are not that long term. So you exit
Okay.
between 3 to 9 months, making almost a 60-65% IRR. That's unheard of in the country in the private equity space. So that's what we are offering the service providers, that become a little more skin in the game as your provider reference grows, and
Hmm.
then kind of pick up specializations and niches in your offers, and become partners. So
Okay.
that's
Wonderful.
aspect to how we have been
Yeah.
doing.
And I'm also curious, before I go into that section, Aaquib, how much time do we have with you? Because I know you're
We have
always.
another 15 odd minutes minimum. I have a next
All right,
meeting at
cool. All right, cool. So, and you mentioned that, obviously, free flow alone can't do and manage the demand that is there for, the kind of
for sure.
services and offerings that you have. And you're bringing in more partners into the ecosystem to help these startups. So just want to understand a little more about this network effects that free flow is bringing in, whether it be connecting the startups with, other stakeholders. It could be partners, investors, or even strategic advisors. How are you facilitating that for the startups that you're working with?
So when I tell you that there are 35 startups in a particular cohort and
Yeah.
60-65% of them are Indian startups, the sensibility is still about, can we raise money?
Hmm.
And it is about how soon is equity or how far is equity from us.
Yeah.
So that's the sensibility with which 80% of the founders come in. Good, bad, ugly, we can debate it on a different podcast altogether, wherein we
Sure.
could have 5 investors sitting together. But the idea is that you need to once soothe that expectation first. Here,
Hmm.
there is many a slip between the cup and the lip of your investment. And you need to understand that gap, work towards it, make it almost side effectual to the ecosystem. Then so every quarter, we do either flagship events, and we've been very categorical in doing it in tier 2, tier 3 India. We chose East India centers first because that is
Hmm.
where we started.
Yeah.
I don't know, and you might ask me that particular question a little
Sure.
later, but we did flagships wherein 80 plus investors from across the country and some offshore came down each event with various themes in which we were picking up strategic cash, in events where we were doing pitch battles, in events that we were doing thematic funds, and so on and so forth. So every event that we did had a certain flavor to it, either the
Sure.
flavor of localization or that of funds or the nature of funds that you're wanting to raise, etc., etc. So the idea was that every quarter we do one flagship with some partnerships. We did something with the government of West Bengal. We did with a couple of AICs. We did with a couple of IITs, and so on and so forth. So keep mixing the flavor of the co-branding nature of it, and bring investors there.
Hmm.
Because out of the 35 deals, at best, our corpus allows us, or our delta exits allow us only to put cash on 2 to 5 at
Hmm.
best. And
Sure.
then I'm guilty of the fact that I've committed more than what I've essentially been able to complete. And I'm committed to the fact that I'll complete each one of them by
Okay.
this year in a big, big way. So we've committed about $16.5 million in total. We've completed around 13.2 in the last year or so, because it is all from our own deltas. It is all
Yeah.
from our own service exits and stuff like that. So I'm not dependent on an LP to complete a round for me. That's the uniqueness of the structure, but that is also the limitation of the structure as an
Hmm.
investor. So
Yeah.
we do bring in a lot of these investors as partners. So we go to the institutional offices, we go to angel syndicates, we go to angel partners, we go to a lot of these platform models that have kind of popped up in the country now, and in Singapore and Indonesia and Hong Kong for a
Hmm.
while now, wherein these kind of come up and hold our deals. So Sunicon picks up a lot of these deals, FARD picks up a handful of these deals. Mumbai Angels has taken a lot of interest in models that we have brought in. Chennai Angels, some cross-border angels have picked up deals. Institutional funds like Bloom have entertained deals from our end. Kalari, Lightspeed, Antler, Anthill. So there's a now that I think of it, there are active partners in the micro fund category, angel category, syndicate category, platform category, and VC category. So we have a total of about 136 partners on the investment end who look at
Hmm.
the 32, 33 deals that we can't directly look at as founders or as venture builders. The only question that they ask us is, why aren't you even picking up a small piece? Because we see you as a strategic service partner
Sure.
here. If you could
Yeah.
also be an investor, then to our diligence becomes super easy, because
Yeah.
then we see that there is a partner who's going to stay with them vertically integrated and
Hmm.
horizontally tuned. Our diligence cycles are going to reduce from a minimum of 6 months, 9 months, because the
Yeah.
soft commitment to actual cash on account in India is about 8 months,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So if we
Yeah.
reduce that to about 8 weeks, that's a
Yeah.
massive reduction in thesis that we are doing, and churn that we are doing for funds. So they're all asking us for that, and that is where our next step is. As far as other partners are concerned, that's more horses for courses. So, for example,
Hmm.
marketing and distribution partners, pre-sales and sales insights generating companies,
Okay.
companies which are doing. So my first touch base with Rimgem was on creating good feedback funnels via Heo and via my operator for the startups that we cater to,
Got it.
because that is somewhere that startups are absolutely not interested at an early stage. I just
Hmm.
asked her, "Are you ready to pick up 60% of the risk? I'll pick up the rest of the 25 for you." And she was like, "If I get good founders, Aaquib, and I get good consistency in models, why not? Because that's
Hmm.
why we are here in the ecosystem. And if our exits become much more premium than what we would have charged them otherwise, then we can outlay a credit ecosystem." So partners
Sure.
like that kind of come to the picture. Zoho comes to the picture. Now Google and AWS in a big way, not just their credits ecosystem, but their advisories have become a partner to us. So somebody
Wonderful.
needs a technology architecture advisory, they're getting it via us. So so the services ecosystem is horses for courses, specific
Hmm.
function specific partners. There are about 32 of them now in India, and about 16 in including GCC, Canada, and New Zealand.
Okay.
Whereas the investment partners are roughly around 136. So
Wonderful. And Akib, before I get into my last part of which is
sections.
specific to Kolkata, but um, while Kolkata Calling wants to bring in more guests from the Kolkata startup ecosystem, and we get founders and entrepreneurs who have agreed kindly to feature, and a lot of them might be listening to this later because I'm sure they'll find this pretty insightful and informative. Uh, if you, in a nutshell, if you could share some impact metrics that FreeFlow has achieved over the last 3-4 years, and who should reach out to you or FreeFlow, and what is the mechanism to get into that incubator or get into the venture studio? If you can share some informational aspect of it, I'm not calling it promotional, but some informational aspect around your impacts and who should come and approach FreeFlow.
So so we are not an incubator and an accelerator. We don't ask you for any equity. So
Hmm.
we'll never call ourselves an incubator and an accelerator. In fact, we are feeder channels or eating channels from those ecosystems. We pick
Okay.
up startups from those. So if you're part of an incubator already or a part of an accelerator already, and you're seeing that there are certain areas and certain functions that are just not adding up, and they've
Yeah.
thresholded for a while, there's some element of tech in your core execution, core value proposition, or distribution and or for customer management, then more than happy, because tech is where it kind of gets the scale element to it, or the
Yeah.
explanatory element to it. Though we've done a lot of these absolutely non-tech impact first models as support ecosystems also. So just to give you a sense of numbers, we've done about 372 startups in total now. 237 of them come from India.
Wow.
Almost 145 of them from GCC, New Zealand, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore, and Canada. And now North Africa, because that's a massive, massive market that Indian
Yeah.
founders should look at for
Everybody is
distribution,
going for Africa now. Yeah.
for exchanging. Yeah, because they are where we were at 2014 with UPI.
Yeah.
That's my
Yeah.
one line introduction to them. That they
Mm.
are where we were in 2015, but with UPI. So you can
Mm.
think of your business model and then map it around. A lot of our red buses and make Mintras are now getting launched there.
Mm.
In different avatars. A lot of our D2C brands are getting launched there. So
Yeah.
a lot of them come from there. Majorly, when I talk about metrics for the global startups, it's on GTM, exchange on markets, sales in India and sales in Southeast Asia that we have been able to implicate. Some investments also. For that, we are working on a global fund of sorts. We are wanting to set up something in GCC, specifically in Qatar, have a
Yeah.
few active general partner and LP conversations live and almost closure. We've got a license already. So we would be coming in with an international fund, which is essentially equity and debt with global accesses at a demarcation of roughly around $53 million for the first year of subscription. Completely focused at early stage, wanting to back roughly around 100 to 150 founders in a year. Across Southeast Asia and Africa, and with India being the crown jewel market in it. So that's been the impact for them. 237 of the Indian models, we have lost on a few models. We haven't
Sure.
necessarily completed all executions. We have had about 23 models who have died in a slow death.
Mm.
Some due to the pandemic, some due to a lack of pivot, some due to just that utter focus on external stakeholding cash will save our day. Uh,
Mm.
so, uh, so we have lost out on 23 models that way, but 204 odd models, 14 odd models have actually gone through. The core achievable has been 39 technology IPs that we have co-developed, 31 marketing IPs that we have co-developed. We've launched about 113 business in newer geographies and trajectories. Invested directly on 43.
Mm-hmm.
Enabled another 31. So that is where the number kind of goes to 74. We are in
Wonderful.
active conversations and closing another 30 deals with our partners, the investor partner ecosystem that we just explained. And the most important metric has been that 147 out of these 214 companies in India are cash positive on unit
Wonderful.
economics. So
Wonderful.
that
I think
is
that's, yeah.
that is what the focus has been. Don't chase
Sure.
your valuations. The value creation will take care of the eventual valuation. So
Yeah.
you had asked me where did the transition and the switch
Mhm.
happen between INV and FreeFlow. This was
Yeah.
where we understood that if cloud services can be sold as infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service, we were failure as a service. And this was coined with one of Calcutta's co-founders, who eventually got acquired in a very interesting manner
Mm.
with a multinational giant. In his office, we were sitting, and he was like, "Aaquib, अगर एक phrase में explain करना हो अपना model तो कैसे explain करोगे? You would not always get Subit to be patient for an hour. So
Yeah.
how would you do that?" And I was like, failure as a
Yeah.
service. Everything that
Wonderful.
can amplify our fail points, make that so visible that you focus on your value creation, minusing those fail points, creating your own fail journeys. Because I'm not
Yeah.
saying we'll be fail proof, but we'll be fail point amplified. So that's free flow. You can all, whoever would hear this, whenever they hear this, they can directly apply via the web portals. There are
Yeah.
various startup India channels that we have, which we power, and events are our best ingestion points, because you start with investors there and then
Yeah.
understand where you are in that investment journey. So yeah, events, direct portal. There is an app that we have planned to launch. It's called Upflow. It kind of supports that SaaS, because it's
Sure.
almost like a snapshotting journey platform for what the startup has gone through at various stages. So it
Okay.
snapshots them. It provides for a notification handling module with their incubators, accelerators, investors. So you have this one data portal which takes care of all your communication, all your updates, all your engagements that need to happen to better you. So Upflow is going to get launched on 16th of March.
Oh,
In
wonderful.
App Store and Play Store. And this would be one area where you come in, put in your basic details, we put it to our SaaS, get back to you with a VB agreement. We are super aggressive. We want to look at 100 deals this year. We're
Okay.
closing around this year, so we will domestically invest, inshallah, much more aggressively. And yeah, we'll pick up anything in between $120,000 to $250,000 as an average, while we don't burn our own house down, which I've been
Of course.
blamed to do. I've
Yeah.
almost been talked about as a bankrupt philanthropist who essentially puts all his money that whatever we generate as a delta, we put back on startups. So we'll keep doing that because the belief is that a lot of our problems will not
Yeah.
necessarily be solved by policymakers and politicians. It will be solved by our next stage of entrepreneurs. So yeah, that's what
Brilliant. Aaquib, I know you launching the Upflow app on 16th. Let us know if you need us to,
sure.
socialize that. We'd love to be a partner in socializing this wonderful app that you're bringing to founders and entrepreneurs
In fact, we
to
will pick
understand.
up a lot of local talent also. We will
Wonderful.
pick up a lot of in minimum of about 20 technology talents just for the Calcutta office. We want it
Wonderful.
to be a technology office also. It cannot just be a back end office or a
Yeah.
customer
Yeah.
management
Yeah.
office.
Yeah.
I'm hell bent on bringing technology companies to establish working centers here, and we've brought about 18 startups from the rest of the country to Calcutta. So we'll pick up
Brilliant.
talent while we launch these apps because we need to keep improving their iterations. So
Yeah.
whether it is a data analysis role or whether it is a machine learning role or whether it is React roles, we'll keep picking up people.
That is music to our community members. Please feel free to share those opportunities with us. We'll definitely love to socialize them with our members. There are lots of folks looking for these roles in Calcutta, so nobody better to have as free flow as employers for them. Aaquib, I know I'll let you go, but we need to have one mandatory last part,
section.
which is around the Kolkata startup ecosystem. I know we had this conversation, why are you based in Kolkata? And this is a conversation you've had with multiple people where you had to sort of give an alibi or an explanation as to why you are in Kolkata. But having chosen to be here and having chosen to stay and flourish here, what do you see happening in the Kolkata startup ecosystem specifically? Because you've been in the thick of things, meeting partners, meeting advisors, meeting investors, and obviously founders as well. Where do you see the Kolkata startup ecosystem doing well? Where is it lacking? What's the way forward?
So I'll be optimist first because
Sure.
that's what defines most entrepreneurs and enablers. I have found very few markets in the country which are as heterogeneous as Calcutta with
Hmm.
regard to the number of things that we do, from
Yeah.
softening water to taking care of water table to improving the mangrove health to
Yeah.
doing data security and endpoint security to establishing virtual QSRs to bringing in bottom-up education ecosystems to doing whatnot.
Yeah.
So and an almost very well thought out business models, very well tech backed, because a lot of people tell me, and then they do ask me this active question when I'm in a ecosystem mixer in a Hyderabad or a
Sure.
Bangalore or a Bombay or in a Gurgaon, which are apparently the more evolved ecosystems. How's the scene there? Is there
Yeah.
a startup scene there? And I just give them one answer: we are not necessarily great at PR, but we do a lot
Mm.
of good groundwork, and the
Hmm.
PR scene is also catching up. So we have the Hello Kolkatas and the Kolkata Callings of the world
We try.
wanting to make that mark in bringing this to the fore. That there's a
Yeah.
lot of positive news from the land which needs telling, and this is something that cuts across our overall ecosystem, from political ecosystems to policy making ecosystems to education ecosystems. We
Yeah.
possibly East and Northeast India have the better schools in the country. They have the better academic setups in the country. They have more legacy with regard social and cultural exchange, political and policy making capacity. Not a lot of people know that we still the fastest growing MSME economy in the country as a state.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we don't talk about it in the startup space. There's so much to innovate there. There's so much to engage there. So the one irk that I have with the ecosystem is they are not necessarily consolidating on the strengths of the area, the strength
Mm-hmm.
of the land, the strength of whatever little improving policy that exists in these parts of the world. And secondly, they're not necessarily understanding the fact that as a city, Kolkata has the distinct advantage of being the only city in the country that can claim to be a gateway to 11 state capitals.
Yeah.
We're the only city in the country. Bangalore is in that way, or Delhi is in that way, or even though they are national capitals of startups and the country respectively, or
Yeah.
Bombay being the financial capital, which is one of the badges that was taken from us. We were the financial capital of the country.
Sure.
We decided how the stocks needed to move. We decided how the board of various big conglomerates needed to move. So the idea is you need to harness that in essence. It needs to almost be treated like how Africa treats itself. None of the countries are markets by themselves. They tell that we have 52 countries as our market because the whole
Mm-hmm.
continent behaves in a certain manner. In our state of affairs, and when we look at Bengal and Odisha and Bihar and Jharkhand, Assam, and I want to name each one of them because often we kind of
Sure.
mix it as seven sisters. बोल के छोड़ दिया.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
Sikkim, Meghalaya, Manipur, Tripura, they are all elements which need to talk. Arunachal, they need to be talked about from the lens of Calcutta. And when you
Mm-hmm.
see that opportunity, the supply chain opportunity, the technology talent opportunity, the migration control opportunity, even if there is a migration that's happening right now for the lack of some basic infrastructural resource at an Arunachal or an Assam, their natural output or their natural sink has to be Calcutta. It
Mm.
cannot necessarily be Bangalore, or it should not necessarily be Gurgaon. So the
Yeah.
idea is, as founders, we need to identify the element of optimization that we get from this city, the kind of opportunity that it represents across streams of business models and business opportunities, the delinking that we have almost done with a scaling robust sector like the MSME. They
Mm-hmm.
employ the maximum number of people in our country, unfortunately. And if you
Yeah.
want to build your top lines in the best way possible, engage with them, solve for them, because
Mm-hmm.
you will get cluster opportunities, and the governments would be so happy because they'll get their mandates getting completed.
Yeah.
People populating mandates also completed, and it added with innovation and insight becomes a very interesting cocktail because it is the kind of scale that a country and economy like ours needs. So my
Yeah.
irk is defining the specific touch points is still thoda sa mismatch. We're still wanting to build what the rest of the country, or for that matter, the fact the rest of the globe is wanting to build, notwithstanding the fact that we have the Maitris of the world, Celefam,
Sure.
who just raised capital. We have Rare Planets of the world. We have, unfortunately, I want Ranadeep to be back to Calcutta. He's
Yeah.
established base in Gurgaon. I really want him to be back.
Yeah.
He can be of so much influence to a lot of these bottom-up entrepreneurs that are coming from this area. I want the Sankets and the Swarnalis to be back from Bombay and then establish tech offices in Calcutta, active
Yeah.
tech offices in Calcutta, because they built their core endpoint security tech stack from Calcutta.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
can't others build it from here? So that's my ask from a Sagar or from an Ankit at Blob, from Meghdut at Techno,
Yeah.
from Aishwarya at Oli, all of these people, from Sunil at Blue Tea, from Rimjim at Heo. The
Yeah.
idea is that there is such a great mix of things that can actually be achieved. From Arun at Chaigram,
Yeah.
these are community first models. These are models that have already established a great PMF. Can we kind of put this together in a bunch that talks
Mm.
about the region also?
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily, I'm never a region believer. A lot of people tell me, are you from Calcutta? I am. And I'm very much from there. I'm 12 days a month in Calcutta. But I represent a stream, thought, and DNA which is very Indian. Uh,
And Bharat, as you highlighted
Nobody,
in our earlier
and
conversation.
and the whole idea is nobody represents the element of Bharat since 1907 better than Bengal.
Yeah.
So why not recreate that magic? Why not necessarily uh, be subversed by the idea कि अरे यार क्या करोगे, उतने मेन फ्रेम सर्वर्स नहीं अवेलेबल हैं, या उतनी
Mm-hmm.
कंप्यूटेशनल कैपेसिटी अवेलेबल नहीं है, या उतने चैनल पार्टनर्स अवेलेबल नहीं है, या हर सैटरडे को ड्रिपर्स हाउस स्टूडियो में एक सेशन नहीं हो रहा है with an interesting founder who's a unicorn or who's growing very quick.
Hmm.
एक टी हब नहीं है हमारे पास, या फॉर दैट मैटर ऑफ फैक्ट गुड़गांव का इकोसिस्टम नहीं है ऑफ एंगेजिंग इन्वेस्टर्स. वो सब होगा अगर आप होंगे, और वो
Yeah,
नहीं होगा, और वो सब होते हुए भी कुछ नहीं होगा अगर आप नहीं होंगे. So
correct.
the balance is there. The balance is
Yeah,
in making yourself relevant to the play, and then
yeah,
everything else will align. You need an investment office coming to Calcutta will bring them. Have a value proposition strong enough for them.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then bring it from Bhubaneswar, bring it from Patna, Ranchi, Jamshedpur, and all of
yeah.
the seven state capitals, because you are where a lot of people can't be. So believe in that power. Believe in the
Wonderful.
fact that Kolkata is truly calling.
Yeah.
So
No, and
that's
and it's wonderful listening to you, Aqib. I think I spoke the least in this podcast compared to the previous ones,
right.
but wonderful listening to you. Extremely engaging and informative. And what I personally, because of the names you mentioned, I've personally interacted with many of them. And what I am beginning to see, because I've been getting exposure to the startup ecosystem through Kolkata Calling, thankfully, is that the voices are sort of harmonizing. Like the way you talk about Kolkata, the way Rimjim, Meghdoot, all of them talk about Kolkata. I think they are sort of now harmonizing very well. It's the same tone of optimism, the tone of self confidence that I hear across, and that why aren't we doing more rather than complaining and cribbing about what we don't have or where we are lagging behind. But it's that voice and that tone that I'm hearing in every conversation that I have with people in the ecosystem that is giving me a lot of confidence and faith that I didn't make a mistake when I came back to Calcutta 2 years ago.
None of
So
us did. None of us
I'm
did.
pretty sure.
It's as good a decision as it could have been every which way. Not just the emotional or the give back
Yeah,
nostalgia manner, but it's a
yeah,
good financial decision. It's a good optimized execution decision. It's a place that you create FOMO. It's a place that you create your first mover scenario. So
yeah,
why kind of put it into question ever? So
ever.
yeah.
Fantastic. Akib, thank you so much for taking time on a busy Sunday. I know you're in office and love those logos behind you, and we want to see more of those. Get a bigger wall.
There is
Thank you
a
so
big
much.
wall. I invite you here. There is a big wall that we've created.
Would
There are
definitely
about
want to
80
visit,
plus
and
plants there. And
we'll
we'll
bring
see.
all the other people that you mentioned on Kolkata Calling podcast. Maybe we'll do a large panel. We want that voice to be heard in unison instead of just one person at a time, but we want all of them to come on board and speak as passionately and as confidently about Kolkata as you did. Thank you so much on behalf of Kolkata Calling. Have a great Sunday and look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thank you for having me here. Thank you.
Thanks, Akib.